Hello and welcome to another episode of the Backdoor Cut Podcast. We are here in Oma with Richy Donnelly in Nature & Co. And we had a great conversation, a little bit about business, but a lot about introspection, a lot about injuries, a lot about club level players and what they think of the inter-county game and what is necessary for athletes to get to that inter-county game these days. So hopefully you all enjoy it, and now on to the podcast. Richy, welcome to the Backdoor Cut Podcast.
Thank you, Peter.
We're having a good chat there off air, so it's not going to be any different. You were down at the hurling yesterday.
I was Munster hurling final. First time, loved it. Great occasion. Spotted a lot of GA royalty. It was pretty cool to see the amount of people from all over Ireland.
What stood out to you about the game?
Limerick's, everything about Limerick. Their warm up, how they approached everything, their focus from the first minute to the end, how they could adapt in game. I'm actually quite fascinated by the tactics of hurling, and how that compared to how Clare were unable to adapt in game with their puck outs and in their attack. But Limerick's focus start to finish was just incredible.
Relentless. They'd remind you of the Kilkenny team of the 2000s a little bit, wouldn't they? Like in terms of their ruthlessness.
I watched that Kilkenny team, remember, but I don't have as good a memory of how to, and I wouldn't see the same things obviously back then, but they do have that sort of relentless drive in them. But this Limerick team seems different. It's not even. It's as if they're just self-motivated now, that they've got to that level where they have an environment where it's all player-driven. Like it's a given that each player turns up and they're motivated and focused.
The thing is, though, in that squad, and it's similar to the Kilkenny team of that day that I'm referring to as well, you look across not even 1 to 15, but 1 to probably 22, 23 and beyond, there's no weak links at all. So if you don't turn up focused and motivated, you'll be out the gate as quickly as you came in. Yeah. Is that similar to the Tyrone team that went and won the All-Ireland? Because I remember looking at that team and thinking the exact same thing. There's no weak links here. And I know from following that, from conversations with you, it was good to actually see Conor there again. The amount that every one of you puts into your performance is just a level above some other counties that I've seen. Is that just needed to succeed at the inter-county level these days?
It is. It's gone. The entry level's gone a lot higher. To one, being a county player at any level or any division, the entry level's a lot higher. But to squeeze out and succeed at any level as well at inter-county, you have to be really, really pushing out and pushing the boundaries in terms of application and input. Now, there is a balance to be struck, and we probably, I'd say a lot of us in the Tyrone dressing room through the years from probably 2015, we probably overdone it in many occasions. Like Peter Donnelly, I would recall a lot of times trying to tell us not to train. Like our Wednesdays were a down night and we had boys going and doing Prowler in Belfast or somewhere, and at that time you did have a lot of boys from other counties were going to the bot. Now, don't get me wrong, we had been the bot the odd time as well, but we were training probably very hard, and it was an obsession. It was probably a thing throughout the GA at that time, where every session you done it was a photo into the group, and it nearly became a competition. And there is definitely a balance to be had, and until you kind of go through that and mature a bit, you realise the importance of actually not doing anything related to the game for at least 1 day a week. But at that stage you're thinking more is better. But to go back to your first question on in 2021 in terms of the competition and how it's nearly the expectation and player driven, we had such a depth of quality at that time that everyone from 1 to 35 probably believed that they were in with a shout of playing on a Sunday, and that for any manager or any group to achieve at that level especially, that's the sweet spot, and that's probably where you need to be.
So open to the floor then, does that drive to go on and better yourself come from almost internal pressures of the group of knowing that, well, he's doing it and he's doing it, so I can't expect to play if I'm not doing it?
I think it's something that I've kind of experienced a wee bit over the last year since I've been coming back from injury and trying to like make your way into the team. And when there's that competition that you're talking about, and it's something that I've always seen in Tyrone, like even Ronnie O'Neill, who's in with us, who struggled to at times get into the team, who was an unbelievable player, but it just seemed absolutely mad the level of, I suppose, competition in that squad. And that just drives on, I think, everything in terms of like you have to be the playing field's nearly level in terms of what you're doing in the gym, out of the gym. So then it just purely comes down to, I suppose, what's going on in training. And again, that's just driving standards in all areas.
Does it transfer from success underage then? Because we looked at the under-20s over the last couple of weeks and the wins in both the hurling and the football. The question always is there going to be an influx of talent coming into these teams now? And is it a good thing for that talent maybe to not walk straight into the team? Or does that talent drive the standards on of the older players? What do you think?
I don't think underage success guarantees anything. Under 20s is a bit of a barometer of what's potentially available for teams and counties to push on with, but minor and academy levels I think is totally irrelevant to senior success, and you see that at all levels, club and inter-county. What it actually can do is it can breed a bit of entitlement, and I've been in a team with that, so my experience of that was we won the Ireland minor pretty handy, to be honest, and we won every game from under 15s right through to an Ireland minor final comfortably. Now scoreboard wise, Cork pulled us back to a point, but we were 9 up at a stage in the second half, and Cork seniors played in the final that day, so it's maybe 30,000, 40,000 Cork ones, and we were only 17, 18. We were just like, what is going on here? Just score after score, but we managed to hold out. But the example I lived that through was under 21s. By the time I got to me last year in under 21s, the management were well within their rights not even to play me in that team, because we all had just assumed, oh, this is the year. Like I played midfield when I was 18 for the under 21s. I was at a good level, and I regressed over 3 years, and that entitlement was just like, oh, we just need to get fit and we'll win All Ireland here, and we were beaten the first round, but only goal convincingly. And that's where I learned a big lesson in terms of what's actually required and how irrelevant underage success is, especially minor. So under 21s is a better indication. But the next level from that is you'll have a core of under 20s at that level, like Tyrone have it now, where you have a core group of players that have serious capability to step into a higher level and achieve honours at senior level, but the environment that they go into is what will dictate whether they actually parachute on or potentially regress or move forward slowly. It just totally depends, I think.
You were probably lucky though in that you managed to stay in for that 3 years even when you did regress, so you had a chance to right your wrong in terms of that entitlement. But I would assume you've probably played with players that were on those underage teams that people thought were going to go on and play senior level intercounty, but potentially not as a result of the entitlement, but in conjunction with that entitlement, haven't reached those heights.
I'd say there is, like there'd be a large number. I couldn't recall now without putting time into it, but in 2021 there might only been a handful of us that were from that minor team. Like it was like Hugh Pat McGeary, Darren McCurry, myself, Johnny Monroe was back in 21. There might have been 4 or 5 of us, which isn't bad on the grand scheme in terms of transferring into a senior squad, but the same could be said for the 2008 minor team, which was Matty, Petey Hart, Kerry Coney, all them boys. There's only a handful of them that transferred in, so you will get a core of a certain team depending on what drive they have, what environment they're coming from, that will transfer through. But
What do you think it is that will kind of remove that sense of entitlement? Do you think it's leaders within the group in terms of like in the actual team, or do you think it's leaders from above in terms of coaches and stuff?
I think it's all contextual to age. So like entitlement can grow much quicker at a young age, especially before or up until 18, and it's hard to have established leaders at that age that can be aware of that sort of stuff happening and that sort of behaviour. So I think at that age they're very dependent on the coaching and the language and I suppose the environment that they're actually in, and do teams or academy or structures, do they facilitate that with someone that can suppose shape their thinking in a way and keep them grounded?
Club level probably has an impact too, I'd imagine.
It
The
does.
environment they're going into there and who's the leaders in the team there can keep them in that trajectory.
And suppose that it'll only ever be as good as the relationship they have with the leaders. So like it's probably a good onus on leaders within certain groups at club or inter-county to probably build a connection and relationship with them younger boys that spot the signs early and start to try and show them.
Because it's something obviously within Trillick, like we're seeing players coming through and playing inter-county level simply because of the leaders that you have obviously within Trillick that have been driving those standards and driving those lads to keep pushing on. And probably a few of those lads playing for Tyrone at the minute mightn't have been ones that were expected to come out of those Tyrone underage teams and go straight into senior level. So that nearly proves the impact that can have.
Yeah, and like I suppose some of them could be shocks in a way, but over time you see behaviours that they have and they just stack up, and then all of a sudden you're like, when it arrives, like Kieran Daly for example, when he arrived this year, when you reflect, you're like, I'm not surprised, but as it unfolds, you're like, he'll develop, he's going to be a very good player, but whenever he arrived, you're like, nah, it all adds up, like what he has done and how he has applied himself. So it's a good example, but definitely there's influence required there from people that come before to behave in the right way.
What do you think is the required level that you need to be at as a young player, say in between that window of 18 to 22, that you can will yourself and habit stack your way into an inter-county setup? Because we've had Shawnee Quigley on, who said that he reckons a bog standard player now can become an inter-county player by just being diligent in terms of how they address their physical performance and then their ability to not turn over the ball on game day. Now that might be specific to certain teams and specific to certain roles within the team, but what do you think is the minimum requirement? Like, do you have to be, is it possible to be a bog standard club player and go on and play inter-county at the age of 18 to 22? Have you seen it happen?
It is possible, and I think the first requirement is the physical side of the game. Like if you physically tick the box of being at the sufficient standard for inter-county level, that gives you a great chance. Whereas if you only tick the skill and talent box, you still don't have much of a chance. You have a bit of a chance, but you're probably not going to be trusted at that level because the physical demands are very high. So if you tick the physical box alone and you're coachable, then your chances of succeeding at that level do increase massively. But you have to be coachable, and like you see an awful lot of players that are physically seriously advanced and do the basics to a standard that is enough for that level, and they're very, very good players.
Do you think that's also potentially why you and the rest of that team that won the All-Ireland kept going down the rabbit hole of chasing the physical? Because you got such return out of it initially that you're like, well, the fitter we get, the better we're going to be, so let's just keep going at it. Whereas realistically, as you said, you probably should have backed off a little bit.
Yeah, like and the Dublin team, when they started winning from say 2013 onwards, the pace they played the game at and the athleticism they had, like I know this heavily influenced me. I became obsessed with that team in terms of physically how they were playing the game. So we thought we have to just put all our eggs in the physical basket here and reach that level, and that's going to be enough. But as you go through time, you then start to realise their game sense, their skill level, how they can use four limbs, how they can manage moments. It's like it's all these other things in the jigsaw that are so important, that you only actually have to reach a certain level physically, and then the rest of them is what will set you apart nearly.
That's a big thing. Like, it's, you see the physical side of things, and I would have been similar to what you were saying. I would have seen videos of you, Matty, Big Conzo down at Black Box doing the other stuff, like, and I was going, these lads are doing this, I need to be at it, like. And you think the answer is more speed, more conditioning, more strength, more size, and then, as you say, like, you look at how many players can kick a ball right and left foot, like, it's as you say, it gets you up to a certain standard, but it's not going to be the be all end all. But yeah, sometimes you have to remind yourself of that sometimes as well.
I was going to check if you were still here.
Still here, mate. Aye, don't worry. I was just here, lads. I'm too busy carrying the podcast last week. McGurn, I'm taking a week off this week. I'm here physically, but I'm just still recovering.
But I did have a question for you to tie you in, and it seems that in particular this year we've reached almost a sticking point where we're not talking about the physical as much anymore. We're talking about the skill level a lot more. Whereas in the last few years, there has been even an emphasis placed on the physical in the media and in punditry, where they talk about, well, this team are the fittest team, so that's why they win. And even reflective of Limerick, like, they might be strong, they might be fast, but they play a system and they play it to a T. Do you think we've come full circle and now we're focusing more on skill work? And why do you think that is?
I think with the GAA, just everything goes in a cycle all the time. Like, there's always a push in, right, who's going to be the fittest and fastest team, who's going to be, like, there was in the past there was the biggest and the strongest team, then it was the fittest and the fastest, and then it was like who can play defensively the best, and then who can get up, and like, it always goes in a cycle, and there's always a transition. I think it just takes a bit of time for people to catch up and realise what's actually happening. You know, when one year when people on TV are chatting about, oh, these are so fit, so fast, and then everyone else catches up and everyone's at a level playing field, I think they just eventually catch on, like, all right, that's just the norm. But then they get back to remembering that what's the goal at the end of the day. It's like, great, can you outscore the opposition and keep them scoring less, and then whoever's more effective at that. I think when you see a drastic change in terms of like a tactical play or a style of play, that, like, people start going on about it for a while, and then it just becomes the norm again, and then they move on to the next thing. So I think it's just naturally just goes in cycles, like. But definitely, I think as people are getting more used to the level of athleticism in the game, it's just become the norm, and people are back to looking at how the game's actually played rather than how fast people are, how fit people are, how much people are getting up and down the pitch. Like,
it's just a standard now, I think, to be unbelievably athletic if you're going to have any chance of competing. And then, as you say, it's gone that way now, where it's just the actual tactical side of the game, your skill level, like, those things are so important. And even when I think of us at the minute, like, the things that are causing us to potentially not win games comfortably is all coming down to probably systems of the game and execution of skills and unforced errors, things like that. It's never a case of, you know, an opposition being fitter or faster or whatever.
That's the biggest thing. Like, probably us playing Division 3 and we play maybe a Division 2 or Division 1 team, like, you're just as fit, if not sometimes. We've probably found that we'd be fitter, but it's the use of the ball. It's like you're getting up to the 45, and then you're fucking, the last pass is letting you down. They're coming down the back of on the counter attack and knocking over a point, or putting it back in net, and that's what's costing you the game. Like, it's the use of the ball majority of the time and playing at that higher level. Yes, you're playing at a certain pace, but can you play at that pace consistently week in, week out, and at that intensity, and still execute the skills, like?
But it seems like in the past, where the tactical side of it went, okay, we don't want to turn over the ball, so we're going to be more risk averse. So we're going to execute the actions of the game that have the least risk of turning over the ball. Whereas a lot of teams in the last couple of years have realised, well, if we just get good at kick passing the ball and playing at the hand, then we can actually execute that and it'll still be averse to risk. So now they're working on those skills a little bit more. Have you seen more of an influx of more risky style of play even in your training sessions at inter-county level?
Probably a mixture. I think it kind of depends on who's involved. Like, I think I've said about 10 times in the podcast about Stevie O'Neill being in, like, and you'll be able to say, like, Stevie O'Neill has you kicking, like, it's so simple, it's such simple stuff, but you're like, it's nearly alien to you because he's having you hitting outside of the passes and he's coaching you to do it, and like everyone else is saying no, in step or play it safe, like. But I think it kind of depends. You do see bits and pieces of it. I think every manager, every coach is going to have a different style, but we've been exposed to more of it, definitely.
You're back in playing with the club now.
I am, yeah, on my way back.
Are you returning to play, or are you back training fully?
Returning to play.
So what stage are you at now? You're back running, obviously. Have you been doing any of the
Back running, no team training yet, but it won't be far away. I just kind of came off the back of last year with a few issues needed sorted, so it's not a timing thing. I don't believe in holding off until the right time. I just feel I'd have been on the pitch in January if I could have, because I'm just used to that, and I respond better to having tolerance and capacity built up and just maintaining. But that's the hand I'm dealt. I just had to sort out issues before I went back into full team training and games. So, but still have ways to get the work done.
Does that come from experience? Because I know in the past you've had plenty of injury issues. Does that come in the past? Would you have tried to push on through that and just get back playing as soon as possible? And you've maybe learned the lesson now of I need to step back, get this right, almost like short-term pain for long-term gain sort of thing?
I probably went the other way with that. I think in the past I would have been maybe oversensitive at times, and not robust enough mentally, and kind of knowing what understanding my body and injury as to what can be pushed through or what should be pushed through, and what is probably something sensible to pull back from. So I've learned probably over time that pain is fine. It's more the root cause, or trying to think 3-4 months ahead. Like, if you persist with this pain, can it actually unfold into something that becomes chronic? And anything chronic it's not a nice place to be as an athlete. So you want to be again, there's times like if you pick up something in season, like there is times you have to push through the chronic thing for a few months just to see out the season. But all things considered, time and context and all that, like importance of games coming up, that's all things you have to consider. And in this case, I missed 5 or 6 league games in the club. I still have a healthy bank of games to fall back on pre-championship, so all being well, that's what I'm aiming for. So all things considered, this time it's the best approach is to actually play the long game. And the nature of the injury with the pelvis, it's like if I did hammer on, like right there, right then, if I had a game to play in March, I could have played it. But I know as I keep hammering that, there's a consequence later down the line. So, yeah.
in another county? It might be worse to miss 6 league games, but you have a bag of league games, so 6 is nothing. 6 could be somebody else's full league.
Yeah, we have 15 league games. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd give me right arm to be playing all of them 6 league games that I could be missing. League games of Tyrone are very important. They're nearly played, in my opinion, to a higher intensity than Championship and some of the other counties. Because obviously there's consequence of if you go down the league, you're down the Championship, so everything has an incentive there. Every game counts in Tyrone, which I wouldn't change. I think it's great. And it's a big contributor to the depth of ready talent that we have in Tyrone at any given time. And it's down to club structures and the coaching the clubs put in. It's a big part of it. So having that importance to every game is very important.
But just to pull you back then, it's clear that you've learned a lot from your own experiences, but around injury and what you're capable of and when you should pull back and when you should push. But you're the second Donnelly that we've had on the podcast. Have you learned something from somebody else's experiences as well, potentially?
That's a good question. Obviously, within Ireland and social media, like a lot of athletes, a lot of people in certain expertise in certain areas are very easy to get to. They're easy to approach and very generous with their time and to open up learnings. Like, I'm sure we've all been in this position where we're like, I'd love to know what they know, or like I'd love an Irish chat with them. And there's people all over the country you'd reach out to, like, and a lot of good people. But I think the biggest thing I've learned from someone else is actually from a management point of view, and our own club manager Jody Gormley, and how he placed trust in me. Like, kind of faced a similar challenge last year, and that I had chronic Achilles trouble, and I was off feet for like 12 weeks post Kerry, and he made that 12 weeks very, very much easier for me than it probably I've experienced from a player to manager point of view. So having someone that visibly trusts you is a massive thing for a player that's trying to come back, especially from an injury. And I think that's been the biggest thing that I've learned. So like if I was ever to go and be in a coaching position or a managing position, I think it's so important to understand that every player that is injured, they don't want to be injured or they don't want to be missing the training session, especially people that have shown they're competitive and played at the highest level, because to get there they have to be competitive. They're not lazy, they're not making bad choices. So I think that trust thing is massive, and that's one massive thing I've learned most recently from that experience.
You mentioned earlier on about the behaviours of players that have got to where they are at the minute. Like, would you say your actions and behaviours in the past would have had a big input on that? Maybe if you had someone who maybe wasn't as diligent with the physical side of things, would they have got the same treatment as you would have with the same manager?
In this case, if you play for Jody, he trusts you, which is great, but it's not always the case. I think you do have to earn a certain amount of trust and credibility within any playing group at any level. But very quickly, depending on where the group sits in terms of where the standards are at, what's their expectations, aspirations and stuff, there's a lot of environments it'll fly by okay, but when you have a group that wants to achieve, I think there's a good element of trust there. You have to earn it too, like, in fairness.
Is it easier within the group though if there is a little bit more depth within the group? So even if a player is missing, the manager can rely on other players to fill that spot or fill that role for a certain period of time.
That's an important context too, the pressure of actually having certain people or everyone available. That's there's no doubt that influences the behaviour of a management group in terms of having players available or forcing people back or trying to rush things. But it's actually interesting listening to Jim McGuinness's talk with, is it the Saffron Business?
Right, okay.
It's very interesting how it was an interview done as well, but he spoke about, I think it's young Conor O'Donnell from Donegal, how they're not rushing his return to play. Like, by the sounds of it, between the lines, he could have been made available in other environments maybe weeks ago, but they're actually holding him out. It's all science led and data led that he's not actually being available until a certain time. So it's an interesting approach. There's probably a bit of in between. Again, importance of games, context of do or die, or players available, squad depth, stuff like that all come into that sort of approach.
That's funny because I did a couple of sessions with Jim present, and I took the warm up for his session that he was doing thereafter. And before the session, he came up to me and said, "Great to meet you," or whatever. He said, "If there's any hamstrings torn, I'll be blaming you." And I said, "That's funny because I'll be blaming you." And I thought then in my head, this fella has no time for sports science because of the picture that you get in the media, I suppose, over the last few years. And then after one of those sessions, I was given a presentation on the data and on the speeds we've been hitting, high-speed running, intensity over the few weeks. And Jim was present in the room, and when I pulled up the stats and the graphs and everything, he came up to the front of the room and sat on the chair closest to the screen and leaned in and absolutely just looked so in depth into all of the charts and was so into what I was saying. It really surprised me. Do you think that's necessary from inter-county managers now, or is he just potentially an enigma in that sense, or an outlier?
He's ahead of the trend, I think, but I think it is essential. The way the game's going and what we've been chatting about with players and injuries, and you need to have your best. I suppose when you have that bank of talent or the bank of players where there is no weak links, you sort of, if someone comes out, someone else can come and do a job. But I think as you go further down the divisions, the amount of players that you can maybe choose from starts to maybe come down a wee bit. So I think having everyone available at their absolute best is going to be key, and I think a big part of that is managing the training load throughout the week as well. Games are obviously massive, and you can go for games flat out, but how do you manage from Monday to Monday to Friday, then getting ready for a game at the weekend. So I think managers are definitely starting to get a hang of it. You hear them talking about the GPS, and they're going and chatting and seeing what distances they've done and what sort of intensities have been there. But I think it's going in the right direction. But I think he's definitely leading the way.
I think it's critical, because players are now, as you say, having access to social media, the best people around Ireland who can get athletes moving really well. So from what I'm seeing at the minute, a large amount of injuries are coming down to spikes in load. So management have to be, at a level now in terms of seeing the data, seeing what's being done on a weekly basis in terms of distance covered, in terms of returning athletes from injury, things like that. What high speed running they're doing, what really high speed running they're doing. Change direction, all that side of things. If you can have a handle on that and see the trends and see how much someone's doing on a weekly basis and keep on top of that, I think you'd reduce the amount of injuries that are being picked up massively.
But it's interesting hearing you talk about spikes in load and then the conversation around depth and club as well, in that you wouldn't be pressured into playing ever. You would make the decision, I'm playing or I'm not. But from knowing you sometimes put pressure on yourself to turn out for the club potentially, because the depth might not necessarily be the same as what it would be for Trillick, when maybe you would benefit from not for another few weeks, let's say. How do you navigate that?
You see, it's interesting because probably the way my club is at the minute, I'm feeling that pressure simply because we are struggling as a club big time, and I feel that pressure to just be there for them and I suppose support them and try and achieve what we want to achieve this year, which is probably at the minute is not getting relegated from the senior championship and from Division 1, and you nearly feel that pressure as one of the main players to step up and play every game and put in your best effort. So that's the only reason why I feel it, and I suppose that's why it's different in other clubs where you do have that player availability. I know we don't have that at the minute, we simply don't, and data goes out the window when you go back to the club, really. If I'm being totally honest, it's not going to be looked at, it's not going to be considered, and that's just a general feeling of what you get as a human, in terms of when you're looking at it just out of a place of probably passion or whatever for playing the sport.
But also because of the way resources are allocated and because certain clubs are bigger than others, not all clubs have access to the data even.
Yeah, they don't have access to the data, they don't have access to physios of training, they don't have access to S&C coaches of training, it's all, especially in my case anyway, so it makes it tougher, and that probably increases the pressure even slightly more, because if you have a niggle or you do have an injury, you do have an issue, you can't validate it through a physio or through an S&C who might say, well, listen, he actually has an issue here. It's more like the manager might just look at you and say, you're talking shite.
I'll tell you what's wrong with me.
It's funny, the perception, so the perceived, looking into Trillick, you think we have huge depth and we have so much going for us, and that I can just say I'll sit out 6 games. That's actually, from a player point of view, that's not the outlook I take. I have huge guilt every Trillick game I watch that I'm not playing, and I put serious pressure on myself still. I'm not relieved of that pressure, and I don't want to be, because I see every game really important for Trillick, and if I'm not contributing, then I'm just not a good person to be around. So it's not a deliberate thing, or that's your outside perception, but every game internally is very important, and it's not something you deliberately say, I'm just strategically I'm going to extend another 3 weeks or sit out. There's pressure there to be right, we need you available, but it's definitely more managed in a way.
Team is actually doing as an impact as well. If they're winning, you probably can slightly feel a wee bit less pressure.
We're 0 from 2, so
0 from 5.
Just from a conversation with another inter-county player, a hurler actually, during the week, I think potentially there used to be a connotation of the county star, the county player that turns up to training in their county gear, watches training and says, I'm managing load, I can't be here, or just turns up and leaves. Is that kind of leaving now? Because it seems that it's becoming more widespread and more known, maybe because county players are being more open that they genuinely want to play for the club, and in the most cases they'll put the club above all else. Is that changing?
Well, if you look at my actions over the last year or so, probably people say no, going on holidays and the championship. But I genuinely think it is. Like there's definitely not that case. Maybe when you're younger and you're maybe involved in minor squads or whatever, like because it was the highest level that you'd ever played at, you're like, fuck, this is the be all end all. It's probably a bit of ego too, like whenever you're young and you're thinking, fuck, I've made it here. Like, but I think the more you go on with it, like now you still obviously want to play for your club and give what you can. From my experience over the last year or so, I think with the frustration of injuries and just being completely mentally fried, like there's times I just wanted to break from it all. Like, I suppose that's what I'm kind of seeing this summer as, and like with the season being done, I'm kind of like taking that bit of a break. That when you come back in January time, you'll be fresh and ready to go. Like, but all you can see, players want to be going and playing for the clubs. Like, you even still have to have the conversations whenever there's club games up, and it's like, lads, like you're trying to be pulled back from boys not going and playing. So no, I definitely do think it's true. Like, boys want to be playing as much as they can, like, especially for the clubs too.
And people have gained insight into your story over the last couple of years through the podcast as well, and that like just because you're injured doesn't mean you know exactly what the issue is all the time. And sometimes you have to go person to person trying to figure out what the actual issue is. Whereas a lot of the time in clubs, and we all know it, if somebody is consistently injured, even with a chronic issue, it's soft or he's faking it or she's faking it for whatever reason. And I don't think that really ever happens, to be honest. How do you like manage that? Do you just block it out completely if that is being said at club trainings? Or not even at club trainings, around the club even?
It'll never really be said to your face. Well, very rarely anyway. It probably goes on in the background. I know myself with the club last year. I could put £100 on it going around the club last year. But there's nothing you can do about that. It's completely out of control, and you know deep down what the truth is, what you're doing, which is always trying to get better and, as you say, play. No one wants to be on the sidelines ever for club or county. So again,
you nearly end up doing yourself in because you feel that guilt, as you were saying, and you're going, fuck, these boys are questioning me here nearly. I need to go and play, knowing fine rightly that you're not right. And then you feel that effect for a week or two afterwards, and you're just going from game to game to game trying to get through it, and you just know in the back of your head that you're not right. Like, I think that builds up to a bit of frustration too, like personally anyway.
It takes an awful lot of strength of character to stop yourself from going down that rabbit hole of playing chronically and playing to keep other people from being annoyed at you, or like you have to have a lot of self-respect there and be like, hold on a minute, I'm not right, I'm not playing, and this is the plan. And if it takes going to gather information from 6 different professionals that all might have a different approach, but I think like medical teams, any team environment, they need to respect a player is well entitled to go, and if they want to go to fucking South Africa and see someone that is specialised in that area, because it's your body, you've one body, and no matter if you're flying fit, that's on you because you've went and done the work. If you're hurt, that's on you as well. So like team environments need to respect that players have one body and they're the one that's responsible for that body being up here or down here, and they're the only person that can fix it as well. So they're well entitled to go and gather expertise anywhere they want, because their true intention deep down is they want to get back playing sport and strip it all back, team identity, all that stuff. You just want to get out there and play a game that you love and run after a ball and get your heart rate up and feel good, release dopamine. Like, that's literally, when you strip it all back, that's what it is. So it takes you have to go through a journey there, and I feel like I've went through it for a long time, where I've had all them feelings and turmoil and frustration and guilt, but you get to a certain point where you're like, I actually don't give a fuck what anyone thinks. I know my intentions under it all. I know where I want to be, and I'll stand by it, that I'll do whatever I need to do to get there. So it takes a long time to get to that, but
too is that emotion side of things, because from what I found when I was at that state of fucking frustration, anger, all those things, like I was not recovering, like, and I wasn't getting better. But as soon as I took it down and I accepted the fact, right, I am injured, I'm not playing, I'm going and seeing all these different people. I'm going to enjoy everything else outside of sport and just be happy. And then the trajectory just starts to go upwards. Like,
it's funny, like if one person had the answers for everything, then you wouldn't have the cycle of like the whole industry of physios, return to play, all that stuff. It's an absolute puzzle, and it probably will never be figured out. Like the only way to not get hurt is stay in your bed. Like, so
I think you said it too, though. It comes down to like, it's you're the one who is gonna get yourself right. So a lot of athletes might fall in the trap of going, right, I'm going to him, he's going to fix me. But you need to sort out what's going on inside you first and actually accept things and realise that it's you that needs to do the work and needs to probably get yourself right.
But I think the thing that doesn't make sense as well that you kind of touched on is some practitioners don't appreciate that it's you. They make it me about them, and they're asking you to have a growth mindset and to collaborate with them and listen to a new opinion and try something new and different. And then when you come to them to try something new and different, that's not their approach. They say, oh, don't do that. Don't listen to him. Don't listen to her. I know the answer, even though, as you just said, none of us know the answer. So you can't ask somebody to collaborate with you and be open and have a growth mindset when you as a practitioner don't have the same thing. Like the person that is injured, the athlete, the person, yeah, they're number one. And everything that you do has to appreciate them and put them first and appreciate that you don't know it all. You just have a system and you're going to make that system more robust and improve it by seeking out other opinions and collaborating with other people. And that's one of the puzzles of being an athlete is you're like, I don't want to tell him that I'm working with him. Yeah. Whereas realistically, you're probably much better just being open and transparent and saying it straight away.
Yeah, definitely. You can fry your head completely if you're trying to hide things from different coaches and stuff. It's something I always did when I was in with Fermanagh. Like I always would have said, listen, I'm going to see him, or I'm going to see this, but just one other opinion, another perspective, and it's because I want to get better.
It's funny, like you're well entitled to do it because it is your body, and all you want is information. Like if you can gain clarity in any situation, like that is a massive relief. And by going to different people, all you're really seeking is clarity, and you not get all the answers, but over time, if you're gathering information, like that's the power, like, and it's power in any situation, whether it's injury, business, life, everything. If you're gathering the information, you can then start to pull together what's relevant for you.
People would have said to me too, like, oh, don't be going, like you're going to too many, there's too much information coming now. And I was like, you're probably right in a sense, but actually I've went to him and I've learned something, and I've went to him and I've learned something, and I've actually learned how to put it together. Like he might be talking about emotional things, he might be just teach me how to actually move my body properly. Someone else might talk about load management, and then you can put it together yourself, and you're, as you say, it's power, like moving forward.
And then under all that, like you're in the industry yourself, like you have a genuine curiosity to learn professionally as well. So obviously it's relevant for you right now as a player, but you actually do want to learn, and most high level players do have that deeper curiosity to actually understand movement, performance, the body, the mind, the emotional stuff, how it's all interlinked. So like it's kind of twofold there. You want to develop as a person as well as get off the table and get on the pitch, like. So
the frustrating thing is though, when you go to those people that are doing well and like have authority within the industry, they're usually the ones that are least siloed and most open to talking and collaborating with each other, whereas the ones that are the most siloed and maybe are frustrated at where they are in the industry and where they are professionally, they don't realize that the reason that they're not progressing is because they're unwilling to collaborate and learn from others. So the more you reach out, the easier it gets, unfortunately, but the hardest thing to do is just step away initially.
You mentioned there about learning and gathering information and making changes over time. I think over lockdown we had you in with No Limits when I was there, speaking on a Zoom. Remember that? And you just opened this place and you were playing away at the same time, obviously. What's been the biggest lessons over the last couple of years in terms of having this place running, growing this place, and then obviously managing your own performance as well? Because like we all know the time demands of both running the business and trying to perform at the highest level as well. Any big lessons or insights over the last couple of years?
If you asked me this question, what are we in? June? If you asked me this 8 months ago, I would have no lessons because I've just been all consumed by performing in football context. Like, as soon as I opened the doors here, it just took off, and it was just like, right, there he goes, that's it. And everything I done was based around football. But since I've stepped away, I've started to learn an awful lot about the business, about what's important for a business to perform. I've just lifted the bonnet on a business that's going 3 years. It's like, oh fuck. And not in a bad way, like it's very busy, it's successful, but it's just like, fuck, that needs to be better, that needs to be better. But it just shows you that when you're in a high performing environment or playing at that level, it engages your mind, like 99% of it. And it's not really business that, I wouldn't say suffers, but it's not getting your attention. And it's probably the same for relationships, for family, for everything. So, and I don't know, like, the more you look at the best sporting environments in the world, they fill all the buckets evenly nearly. They don't go all into one. And I think that's where the GA is way behind in terms of educating the people that take up positions within it, and educating the players, and having a more balanced outlook that actually when you fill all these buckets and all these cups, everyone wins, especially the person that's actually trying to provide for all of them people, that whether it's family, business, managers, teammates, girlfriends, whatever. But I'm only starting to realise now that I'm in the position to reflect. So like it's part of the reason I probably decided to step away from the game this year was I started to meet a lot of good people, like be very friendly with Conor Myler there. Conor's a very curious lad, and he looks within himself all the time, and he's always kind of searching to learn more about himself, like, and for a lot of people it's like, Jesus, that's too much. But I have unbelievable respect and admiration for how he's brave enough to actually do that. And when I seen him leading the way that way, and I started to do it, and then I like met Neil Collins, he's the same. I've like one of the most inspiring people I've met, like, and the more I started to like be around them people and start to look inwards, I was like, fuck, I want to learn so much more about myself. And for years, since I was about when in the first year in school, I was basically held on a pedestal of an identity of football. And I just got to a stage where I was like, I really want to learn more about myself here and really understand, take away that shield of being an inter-county footballer or being a Tyrone footballer. It's like, I wonder what's there. Like, I really want to understand that. So that curiosity was one. It was a small reason, but it was one of them where I actually wanted to nearly lean into it and be like, right, take that away from me and see what I'm about. And that's one of the big learnings that I've probably experienced in the last 6 months. And I've a lot more to go, but I've definitely, now that I can start to reflect on 10 years of what I have done, what I haven't done, what I might do better, and same in business, same with life, same with relationships, everything. So it's a really interesting time. It's challenging, but it's that's one of the big things I've learned, is like trying to really understand who you are. And like, if to give advice to any young player, like, you boys are still young and still have big careers ahead of you, but I think to get the best out of your career would be really understand yourself first before you go out and try and be the best footballer or best hurler or whatever.
I was just going to say, have you anything in particular that you will be delving into in the next few months, weeks, years, to really get to know yourself more? Because it's deep, like, and it's probably requires deep stuff to get into.
A lot of time. The psychedelics route, something that really intrigues me.
I was about to say, my girl's going about the mushrooms here, and then it just came up.
Just get it out, come on.
Few mushrooms before the podcast there.
That's a route, and I've read a lot about it. That's a route I definitely plan to explore. not afraid to say that. Like
Give us a shout, sure, and we'll all come down. We'll get involved.
Here or somewhere else?
no preference. Just with the right guidance.
It's not just winging it as well, we better say and preface there.
Oh, absolutely not.
Like
Yeah.
any of this exploratory medicine or exploratory introspection, you're better off outsourcing to somebody that will guide you with experience rather than doing it yourself. And I'm sure you've had experiences with tons of elite level practitioners that have tons of experience to guide you through it.
Yeah, and that's the underlying, like, most important thing is that it's done in that way and done whenever you're ready for it as well. It's not something to be rushed or jumped into. So there's a lot of basic stuff that I have to do first to really understand and get to know myself better, and without coming across too heavy. Like, a lot of people would probably look at this and listen to this and think, fuck, that man's cuckoo there. But I think the bravest people actually want to look inwards, and there's not enough people probably lead the way in that front. I don't really care what people take from this, but I certainly am one that wants to learn more about myself. So whatever comes from that, I'm more than happy to.
That's massive, like, because there's definitely not enough people talking about it. Like, we've spoke about it bits and pieces before, and that's what I suppose that's what we're trying to get from the podcast, is trying to understand players a lot more and understand that players are people at the end of the day. Like, I did work with a company, Total Mental Performance, and it was like almost like therapy initially, and then you go into like the mental performance side of things. And what you said about the identity of being a footballer, being an athlete, mine was like, right, footballer, athlete, coach, and then it was like, right, what the fuck else goes on outside of that? Like, and I was trying to figure out what you're doing, what you actually enjoy, what's like what you want to get out of things, and understand yourself before you go into it. And understand, like, I was trying to wear all these different hats. When you realize like all these different hats or umbrellas come under the one person, like, so it can go pretty deep, like, but it's definitely something you've seen a lot more of these days, like, as players. And I think just, I suppose I'm saying players because we're chatting about GA, but there's so many players that are even in the professional lives. You mentioned Mailer. There's plenty of others who are looking to push on professionally too, and I think a lot of that comes from the personal development side of things as well. Like, so I think it's going to be a big thing over the next couple of years. Like,
And it's funny, like, I'd walk into rooms and over time it started to frustrate me. Like, when you walk into a room as someone with perceived status, there's instant trust and instant credibility, and when you step back, you're like, why is that? Like, there shouldn't be, like, without anyone knowing anything about you, they shouldn't write you off, but on the same other side of the coin, they shouldn't give you instant praise or status because they don't actually know you, they don't know your character. So it's wrong on both fronts. So, like, when I now go into a room, I'm no longer Tyrone Footler. It's like, I'm just Richie. And the more that's happened at the start, I kind of struggled with it. It's like, fuck, who am I? I'm kind of looking around, I'm anxious, and now I don't really care. I'm just comfortable in myself. And for me, that's a lot of development in a space of 7 or 8 months there. So
That's huge, I think, in the intercounty scene. Like,
I was going to
the
say,
identity is just purely, I'm an intercounty.
you're in a bubble, don't you? You're like
18 to 30, whatever it is. Like, you have a long life to live after that, and if you don't have something outside of it, or you don't know yourself, you don't know who you are, then you're likely going to struggle. Like,
totally, and you do see that, like, when they finish up with the game, the amount of players, male, female, in any sport or code, they lack direction and they lack a purpose, they lack identity, and they just question their own self-worth. And I'm sure we've all been through it ourselves, like, and injury does that to you as well. When you're not playing, you don't have an identity, or that's what you perceive. And to be fair, probably have to shout out the GPA are doing an incredible service to players across the country there. That, like, I know Joe Brawley and them boys, they give them a touch, but in my opinion, the GPA is actually doing what the GA is lacking to do and ignoring. And for what players bring to the GA, the GA is nearly neglecting them in terms of what they bring and what they're getting back. And that's not financially. I don't believe in that model either. I mean, what's being demanded from players, the GPA is actually propping that up and supporting them on the professional front and emotional. So they deserve huge credit.
and it's probably not being availed of enough either from within teams.
The best environments will have players that are open to go and avail of that, and it's not the case all over the country, but I think it's something that is growing in the last year or two.
I think it is being availed of by some that haven't been outspoken as to that they're availing of it as well, because I was speaking to Ian Reeves, who is head of psychology and wellbeing in the Rabbitohs, and he was working for the GPA before, and they're just
recently too, wasn't it?
yeah, up to a couple of years
This year I
ago.
done a bit of work with
Yeah.
Ian, great fella and very knowledgeable.
But I was chatting to him, like, just at events or whatever, because we'd be mates, and he knows everybody in the country. Like, and he would have been up and down the country and on Zooms, and he was telling me about 8 to 10 hours days of back-to-back calls. So there's a lot more athletes doing it than we probably appreciate, but what we're saying here is most people should be doing it in general, not even just athletes. And I think injury is a real accelerator of that process, because you just lose that identity immediately. When you walk in the room as an injured athlete, you don't get the same response as when you're playing.
You're irrelevant, yeah.
You feel that like as well?
But it is true, like
I feel that.
you feel it yourself, but it actually manifests to be true in the attention you get, like all the silly surface stuff, but it does actually manifest to be true. And you see that, like even Mailer was telling me the other week, and I laugh now, but like it is funny, like a year ago kids were sprinting to Conor Mailer to get gloves and signatures, but because he's injured at the minute, or was injured, he's on his way back all being well, but they're now running past him to go to Niall Davlin, to Shawnee O'Donnell, but it just shows you like that's true evidence of that being the case.
And it's important to have things outside of your life, or outside of your footballing life, so that you can give everything to your football. But I think from that conversation, and you saying other sports do it better, I think soccer potentially was where GAA is now, maybe 15 years ago. And I think the change happens not from top down, it starts from bottom up, and the players have to kind of relent a little bit and maybe pull back a little bit and say, look, I'm brave enough to stand on my own 2 feet, and I want to do this for me. And if I do this for me, I'm going to be a better player for you then down the line. But it's the same issue as us having this podcast and players pulling out because another adult tells them they're not allowed to do it. You need to be able to make your own decisions as a person, as a human being, and as an adult. You're not just Darren McGurn full forward. You're not just McGurn Fitness either. Like, you're Darren McGurn.
It's so relevant though now that the more I think about it, that identity thing and players being told what to do, and like they probably forget that in 10 years when they're 34 or 5, like no one gives a fuck about them anymore. Like, and that's the reality. And who are they then? No one knows about them. So I suppose again, as you always talk about, is getting that personal brand and finding out who you are.
Well, you can.
You boys are well on your way doing that, anyway.
But it's not even.
It's using it when it's there. Like it's.
Yeah, like Connor does a load of charity work as well. Like it's whatever you want to do and how you want to give back. Because
Use your profile that you're building, like using it for good advantage, like. As you say, like you'll be forgotten about, and you said it as well. Like once you're retired, you'll be gone 2 years' time, like.
We've forgotten about it over the course of this podcast because we've been talking about much more important stuff, in my estimation. But the draw was done this morning, and Antrim are playing for Fermanagh in the Talton Cup. So you might as well.
I'm gonna be on the
Gaby's
line.
actually available again. You hear
Hi,
that?
I'm back in. I was like, here, listen, I have the cure.
He rang Andy there this morning.
He says,
I have the antidote from McGurn here.
stick me on McGurn now.
It is. Put it on top.
We knew it was going to happen. Like, so it's something to look forward to, obviously.
I have a better record over Fermanagh than you would over Antrim. Would that be right in saying?
You do, or Antrim? Are you talking about me and you?
Personally, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say head to
you're
head.
right.
I'm up, am I? 2-1.
You're just fueling the week's team talk here,
I'd
KB.
say you are, aye. But
You might get a minute.
it'll not be long, Cup. I'm out, lad. I'm not available.
McGurn starting centre half forward.
Absolutely. So, like in relation to the Talton Cup fixtures, we said it last night. Like, we knew that it was going to be pulled out this way, and we kind of knew this prior to the podcast even running into the season. I said it like months ago that
Antrim every single year since I started playing county football.
What's it like from a player's point of view playing in the Talton Cup?
Well, I'm not playing this year, but I first year was shit. The first year of it, this next year was class.
What made it shit? Was it the perception of it?
Yeah, 100%. It was what we thought of it. I think I said about this last week, the week before. Our team and our panel didn't have a buy-in to it at all, so our attitude was shit going into it, so we were never going to get anything out of it. Whereas when we had a load of boys left the panel and stuff as well, it just wasn't a good year. But then the next year, I think I was maybe Andy's first year, it was like, right, this is like a development sort of pathway for us to be playing more games. Our big incentive was to get the Croke Park. Like how many lads in the panel had played in Croke Park? I think there was maybe 2 in a league, Division 4 league playoff or something. So it was like, right, get the Croke Park, build on this to try and push towards Division 2, and everyone bought in. We thought we were serious potential to go and give it a rattle, like, which, you know, we're probably not too far away from it. And when you're bought in, you're playing over the summer, you're playing on the bigger stage. Probably the incentive was there as well. You were getting the Croke Park games were probably being televised. Like, it was the GA have give it the backing, and they've given players the incentive to go and play it. So I think it's class. Like, especially coming into the summer, it starts to feel like proper, like, knockout game there yesterday. Like, that was the first it's probably felt like a proper championship game. Whereas you were playing maybe, you know, you're playing group games or whatever. Yes, it's still important. Maybe the Sligo game started to feel like a championship game. But yeah, you're playing ball in the middle of summer. It's class, like.
Then I'm not going to ask you to pick who's going to win Antrim for Mana, but who impressed you over the weekend of Tailteann Cup fixtures? I know you had said that.
Yeah, we scraped over the line, to be honest. London were solid, like, and listening to GA Social on the way up the road, like, and they were saying, like, Oisin McConville was saying, like, London, people see London and they see New York and think it's a gimme, like, but they're not the same teams as they were maybe, you know, 5-10 years ago, like, which is true. Some of the ball London played was good, but in saying that, we weren't at the standards that we know we can hit either. Didn't see any other games. Watched the Munster final. Didn't see any other Tailteann games. Just the hurling. Normally just drive it.
He's sure a strong team as well, though. And from the highlights, like, New York stuck it to them. And
last year, New York too. New York could have beat Carlow last year because we played Carlow in the quarter final. I was watching that game. New York were thereabouts. I think even had a chance in the last 10 minutes, and then I think maybe Carlo just pulled away at the end. But they were in it, and I thought there was one stage in the game I thought New York were going to pip it. Like, I think they had maybe 1 or 2 chances at the end, but I think they might have started going for goal here. I can't remember off memory anyway. Like.
They had chances to win yesterday. Like,
I think the tough thing, and the reason that people think London, New York are down the bottom grade, is because they don't see them enough, because they don't get enough games, and it's hard. How do you figure that, or that's the one thing, like, in terms of structure, how do you give them more games that are meaningful when they need to travel? Like, it's probably an impossible answer, like.
You should travel. I'd say every team would be chomping at the bit to get playing New York over there.
that's true. Actually,
like, they should rotate New York around the provinces. I think, like, it's every province or team would love the opportunity to go to New York for 4 days, funded by the GA, and experience it, take it all in, use it as a fundraising exercise for their county, like, lean on their network. Like, it could be something, and I think they would get more growth in the game by doing this, by rotating the New York around the provinces, and London to an extent, but New York would be more exciting.
There is a chance if it's rotated around the provinces, though, you know you're only going to play New York once every 32 years, so the team that heads over potentially could lose the run of themselves in that 4 days fairly lively. And New York can have a great chance of winning that game, though, I'd say. But to move on to talking about Sam Maguire, then, fixtures coming up this weekend, we'll just fly through them. Clare, Donegal with a big win there. Cork and Tyrone, you don't have to answer on this one if you don't want to, Richie, but we'd like to hear.
It's a tough one. I think Cork's running power is going to challenge Tyrone. There's a lot of good feel in Cork at the minute with hurlers and footballers, and it's a good Cork team. They have firepower, they have physicality, they have running power, they have variety in their game. Like, I think Kevin Walsh made a good impact there. He's made them more consistent in a way, and that they're not leaking as much at the back, which has given them a better foundation. And if they get momentum within a game, they're very difficult to stop. So traditionally, Cork Tyrone has been quite tight, so it's going to be a tight game. Like.
Mr. Draw over here.
I've called a draw a few times. I'd say.
I think twice, is it?
Got it
You've
right.
called it twice. Have you got it right twice?
Penalties in the Ulster final, sure.
Cavan Roscommon. This is going to be a tight one actually as well.
Yeah.
That's all to play for, isn't it? For both, winner takes all.
Are you going for a draw on that one as well there?
Go Scum.
Cavan Roscommon.
Yeah.
I think Derry have to bounce back and get over the line. Yeah, I think I'm going to go Derry. I think they have to bounce back. There has to be a big reaction from them. There's been so much question marks. There's been so much in the media. Like, they just, yeah, I think there needs to be a big performance in them, even for their own sake, and maybe like a pride thing, or even just like a stubbornness to being like, "Yous, we're still here," sort of thing. I'm expecting a big reaction.
Well, we'll see what happens. Richie, thanks a million for coming on. Great conversation.
Thank you, lads. Pleasure.